Okay, audience. I am here with Richard. I'm so bad with names. Valdez, and you were on Lizard Brain Radio a while back. You are a fire skink breeder, right?
Correct.
What do you breed? What do you keep? What?
Currently I have one bearded dragon, two painted agamas,
Okay.
and about 20-something fire skinks.
Oh wow! And what do you do like beyond that?
My main job is I work with kids with disabilities.
Oh wow!
So breeding fire skinks is just a side hobby of mine.
Because normally we would jump right into this. Remind me at the end to talk about something I want to do later on over here with the Children's Hospital. Remind me later. We'll talk about it.
I'll try my best.
Yeah. And so today we're going to go over the fire skinks, behaviorals, their care, and then go over some neuroscience. Because it's one of the few skinks they actually have brain scans that you can find for them. And so it's really wild. And we'll go over a lot of this stuff. And I do have, for the audience, I do have studies in nonverbal human communication, of which I have been very much, and I have actually studies. I used a role-playing game, and I actually had people try to hide their tails with what I taught them. And then halfway through, I taught them to use group dynamics to overcome the imbalance. And it was nice. So I've been able to use that. So when it comes to skinks, I have 3 zebras. So I think that they're pretty similar to fire skinks. And I have 4 Peter Banded skinks right now. But I've had about 7 or 8. I've had my 2 favorite ones pass away in the last couple of months, and one was old. So, and they're wild caught stuff. So we're gonna talk about that. Talk about how this behavioral stuff transfers over from skink to skink, and what it means, and all that stuff. Now, so when you were on Bill, it sounded like you were very, very knowledgeable on the behavioral.
Well, when you have so many individuals, you get to see a lot of different behaviors.
Do you keep them all separate?
I have a young group of captive breds together. It's 1.2.
Okay.
And I have a couple 1.1s going on.
Okay. And there's no problems with that?
So far, no, but I have to keep an eye on the 1.1s because the males can get a little too rough.
Okay. Yeah, people don't realize the reason why a lot of these skinks have 2 penises, a lot of reptiles have 2 penises, is because of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's probably one of the evolutionary reasons why they would have 2 penises. Like I've heard people tell stories of the blue tongues actually death rolling while the male was trying to mount them. Is that something that fire skinks worry about?
I've seen males lift and toss around a female before.
Okay.
But thankfully, I had them outside, so that was easily broken up.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I think for better positioning. Or if the females aren't cooperative, they just take control, and that's when you get issues.
Okay. Yeah, see, I've had emerald green tree skinks as well. I've had 3, and I haven't had any females, so I didn't get to see any mating stuff, but I've seen videos of them mating and biting the tail and working their way up. I saw one of my Peter Banded skinks do that. Like I have like 1 female right now with 3 males, and the dominant male snoot, he's kind of an asshole. I've seen him bite her tail and start to work his way up. So I'm pretty excited to probably brewmate them right now, this year, and see what happens afterwards.
Yeah, I don't let them start low because of injury. I've had recently a female lose a foot because of that.
Okay.
So
that's very interesting.
Typically, if they need help, I'll try to position them up right behind the neck, and then usually if they grab that, they're pretty good.
That's interesting. So you actually position them.
Yeah, I've had a couple males where I physically moved them into place.
Okay. That's interesting. That's actually quite fascinating. Anything to teach people about that?
I mean, if they got it, they got it. Don't interfere. But if you're gonna help, just make sure it's in a wide open space.
Okay. That's important stuff. Like, I didn't know that. I may have to look at that if I ever get some female zebras, because there's a lot of similarities between the species. So we'll look at that.
He was a very young male, just over a year old, but he was big enough where I could trust him to be with an adult female.
Okay, that's cool. Like, that's actually interesting. I didn't know that you would want to do that. No, okay. No, have you figured out how to sex them?
Not foolproof.
I may have something then. Do you know of the hip to head ratio?
I do not.
Okay, in Peter Banded skinks. We also see it, but I've never heard anybody actually mark it. I mean, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I've got videos of me with my Peter Banded skinks introducing them to each other, and I show that there's a difference in the size. I think it's among all skink species that the males have a bigger head to hip ratio. This was a guy who's actually writing a book on the Peter Banded skinks, let me in, and he took data from all his that he knows sex. And I've heard people talk about the vent method. I don't like the vent method because I've seen where it failed me. And I've got I think he's a male. And so a female has about, on a Peter Banded skink, has about a 1-to-1 ratio, head to hip ratio. On a Peter Banded skink, a male should be closer to 1.25 head to hip ratio. So the head should be wider. I was at a show, and I mean, you're talking about not a fully adult male, but I thought it was a female because, like, just looking at it. And so I took my key because I didn't bring my actual measuring tape. And so I took my key and I took the head to hip ratio of it with my keys. And you're talking about, like, where it's like, oh, well, you know, it goes, you know, all the way out here, where his hips all the way here. So it's like, no, that's a male. Like, that's automatically like, no, that's a male. And then I went and got a female, and it's like 1-to-1. Like, exact spot on the key was the exact spot for the head and the hip. Like, it's something actually fascinating. And I mean, when you're talking about like a zebra, oh, you can tell completely the difference in males to females because of the coloration. So that's not really something most people would see. On zebra or on emerald skinks, I think they're so small. Even a 1.25 difference is super small on those guys. Like, they're probably a little too small to sex this way, but it probably holds up with that too. It's probably in the species, since you do see a head to hip ratio difference in the blue tongues. You also see a tail difference sometimes in blue tongues. But this one that I've got upstairs, broken, he's got 3 broken stripes. When I first got him, he had a 1-to-1.6 head ratio, and then he grew to 1.18. But he has the shorter tail than all my other males. So I don't know how that works. So he's the one that also, like, the vent doesn't quite match up to what I think he is. And he doesn't behave like Houdini, my female, does. So I don't know. I don't know if he's something happened to him in the egg, genetics. But for him to have broken stripes, something's off. So he just may be the rarest Peter Bandit and a skink in the world that actually never reproduces. So I don't know. They're all wild caught. So, but that's what somebody said about the fire skinks, is that the heads of the males are a little broader. I don't know what the measurements are, but that would probably hold up.
Well, it's weird because males can be much bigger headed with longer snouts.
Yeah.
Or they could have the same snout size as females.
Yeah. It's
not a foolproof method.
But we're not talking about snout. We're talking about ear to ear.
Yeah, some of them have the same as females.
But that's like Broken. Like I said, Broken has that little bit. It's like a buddy of mine was talking about his python. It's like, so everybody says the tail length determines the size of the python. And it's like, okay, so if it's this size, it's a male, but if it's under this size, it's a female. Well, what if it's in between? Nobody talks about that. This is stuff that nobody studies. But I have actually tried to study this stuff because I've got a bearded dragon who also has the longer snout to vent ratio, but has laid eggs. So it's a female. So it's really interesting that these physical traits are pretty, like, you probably see them, but yet we don't know. Somebody brought up an interesting point. Are they wild caught or captive bred, the ones that you have the majority of?
It's almost an even split right now.
Okay, because that's interesting. Somebody made up the point that that you only catch the ones that are probably sickly. Like it's probably, or you're catching the ones that are healthy, and you're kind of culling the population. So the ones that we might catch in the wild maybe are the ones who aren't the healthiest necessarily, or it could be the opposite. It's one of those things that nobody's really kind of studied.
As far as I've noticed, none of mine had any issues or parasites or anything like that.
See, I've got Peter Banded skinks that had a little bit of parasites, but I actually see something that I actually find quite interesting.
Yeah, because out of my original group of those like 22 breeders, 20 of them were wild caught and 2 were captive bred.
Okay.
And all but one of them came in really healthy.
See this one right here, this Peter Banded skink, this is somebody else's picture, but this is the best picture. This is something I wanted to talk about. See the pink? I've seen this. The pink on the belly is actually a sign of a skin infection. It has to be treated with antibiotics from a vet. You people cannot get this in the public unless you know your vet. You are not going to be able to get this antibiotic on your own. But these right up here at the mouth, these kind of white bubblish, these are actually blisters. And what I've seen here, I know what this is from, and I'm literally like, this is somebody else. They were wanting this animal sexed. And I was the only person to actually go, no, something's wrong. You need to get this animal to a vet because that is actually a skin infection. And those are blisters because of bad substrate. And they showed me the substrate. It was like clay rock. It's like, yeah, no, that's terrible substrate. Like that's literally brutalizing the skink as he tries to move through it. And it's like, but a vet did tell me these blisters you could probably actually by the mouth, you could probably use betadine that does not have pain reliever in it to do that. But the rest of it has to be antibiotic from a vet. Have you seen anything like this for fire skinks?
No.
I am so sorry. I pushed the wrong button. I am so sorry.
That's fine. No, I haven't.
So
they don't show signs that something's wrong.
It's
until they literally drop dead.
Yeah.
You will not know anything's wrong until they actually just die.
And I think that's something I think we should take note of, because I've got video of some of mine Peter-banded skinks showing some signs. I've got one that's blind. And the only reason why I know he's blind is because he literally, I've got video of him running in a lamp. Not a joke, like actually running in a lamp because he doesn't know to get out, but he recognizes my voice. Like, very intelligent. And he will literally, like, if he's on me, he will take a look, like look straight at me. But he's hard of sight. He actually has to take his face and touch the worm and then bite down. Fire skinks should have that, but yet because they have sight, they probably wouldn't use it much. You think so?
I've noticed a few things when they're ready to go. They stop burrowing. That's the only real indication that they're going to pass away soon.
That they stay at the top.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what mine did. Carrie, freaking No Name, they both stayed at the surface.
And they also die as soon as they start shedding.
Okay, because tough on them shed.
So they'll go through a shed cycle. They'll start the shed, and then they'll die mid-shed. Okay. I've seen that happen 7 times now.
Yeah, see, I've seen it happen twice. No, 3 times. 3 times. Yeah. They will actually bask the Peter-banded skinks, and they will pass away. Gecko's my blind one. He stays above the surface because they feel sickly. That's the most likely scenario. And they get that heat and the sensations. So they're probably feeling more sensations than they normally do. Probably because the brain is actually like forming together because they're dying. But Gecko is actually sick. So that's what they do when they're sick. So something's wrong with Gecko that caused him to go blind or hard of sight. And so he remains at the surface. In the wild, he'd be gone. So that's a very interesting one. One that most people don't talk about that I actually had somebody ask me the other day was that I talked about Carrie losing some fingers to bad shed. And you can start to tell like male Peter-banded skinks because this mark where the top of the head, they have a line going over. And all the males that I have, none of the females do it, but all the males that I have, there's a little spot on the right side that comes off like balding when they shed. So what that's telling you right there is just kind of bad shed. And so they like Carrie was an older male. He was awesome, but it looked like a bird came down and grabbed him, but it was just such bad shed. And so they will actually lose fingers sometimes. Nubs, my zebra skink, is missing all of his front fingers.
I've never had a shedding issue because the substrate's usually pretty humid.
Yeah.
So they have a lot to work with.
So this reptile file, when you're talking about CARES sheets here, did you find anything that you thought was not shouldn't be there?
I think they were promoting some items that you don't really need. Like you don't need the tube UVB.
You don't need the tube UVB?
Nah, a lot of us use bulbs.
Okay.
I personally use VivTech and their UVB bulbs.
I actually use a tube on my zebras, but I also use a grow light. Like almost all my animals, I have always used a grow light and a tube just because I didn't even know VizTech was a thing when I started. So yeah, no, I actually have degrees in physics. So the VizTech bulb is giving them what they want. Like it's giving them everything.
Yeah,
they actually use it.
Yeah, when they bask, I got the overhead heating, so when they bask, they get both at the same time.
Yeah, I never liked that under tank heating. I've never used it. What I would do, I've actually started to look at pool liners, like actually pre-made pool liners, like 125 gallons, and I'm going to fill up the base of it and put my Peter Banded skinks in there. And because they're not going to climb out if you actually cover up the edges, they won't be able to do that. Even though Houdini might find her way out. That's what she's named for. Because I've actually had her escape. But they, oh God, what the hell? I can't even think what we're talking about just for a second. What were we saying?
UVB.
I can't even remember. But no, what else did you find in this deal? Anything with heat?
I don't think they really specified their heating.
They did.
Or if they did, it was pretty spot on.
Okay, because they did. I try to get my hot spot a little bit hotter. Basking temperature 92 to 96.
Yeah, I say 95, but anything in that range isn't good.
But I'm not for sure the zebras and the dill are exactly the same. I try to keep my emerald swifts because they're right next to it a little bit lower, but I try to keep my zebras a little bit higher, but not much higher. Like I try. I didn't
the
say
nighttime temps, you can get down to 65 comfortably.
Oh yeah. I stay about.
But anything below that, it's a little risky. I haven't really tested out how low they can tolerate because I'm afraid they'll die. But
Okay.
65 degrees is perfectly fine.
Okay. And I didn't really see anything else that I thought was of note.
I noticed they didn't have any temps for babies and stuff.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't. I don't think that she would know that. You might send her an email or something about that. What temp should they be?
Usually they're basking, I keep at like 85 degrees.
So a little bit lower?
Yeah, basically for babies, you just treat them as mini adults. So you just keep it a little bit cooler, the hot spot a little bit cooler, and just downsize all the food the adults eat.
Okay, that's cool. I can get behind that. Yeah, so now that we've covered all that, so we pretty much, the care's all there. Like anybody that wants to care for these things should. Any type of substrate that you would recommend?
I like Reptisoil as my main base. I like to add in like coconut fiber, sphagnum moss, and if you want to go bioactive, you need some leaf litter in there.
Okay.
And then I've been trying out this jungle mix from, I think, Zoomed or one of those companies.
Okay. Yeah.
It's nice, but it gets compact a little too easily.
See, I try to go the cheaper route on stuff. So I go to Home Depot, get play sand and stuff like that. And I didn't like the mix that I used. It didn't really turn out as well as I would like. They're still capable of using it if I don't water it. But their play sand was not good. I need to go find another place that has play sand and stuff. I need to rearrange that for them. But reptile soil is good.
Yeah, the only downside to that is you get mold and mushrooms pretty easy.
Okay, I've seen mushrooms in some of my other stuff.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that with
reptile soil or my soil?
reptile soil.
Okay.
Because one of them I may have to change out because it smells a little off, and that's usually an indication of mold inside.
Yes, that is a massive important thing. I am so sick of people trying to tell me how shit works. It's like, no, I have a degree in physics, guys. Start paying attention to what I'm telling you. And I'm not talking to you personally. This is not you personally at all. This is just the audience and people that I've had try to come at me when it's like, no, you're not understanding. My emerald skinks died because of mold in the apartment. They got actually infected. And then if you're trying to keep 70 to 100% humidity all day, every day, you're going to get mold, period. There's no way around it. The thing is that people aren't looking at like quarantine. They aren't looking at the keeping of these animals as a goal. What's the goal? Why do you need humidity? Because they get freaking kidney problems if you don't keep them humidified, if you don't have some type of water source that actually can get to them. That's what happens with chameleons and stuff. So it's not, oh, well, the humidity is going, no, it's the kidney disease. So that's why they use screens and spray them multiple times a day for that. So this is why you even spray Peter Bandit skinks down to make sure they can get liquids, because they still need to drink, even though they are a desert species. And it's just, people just want to go, hey, no, you're stressing them out. It's like, nah, I would rather stress them out for a couple of hours and get them rehydrated than let them be hydrated.
Yeah, I usually do my missing at night. None of them are usually awake by then, so I don't bother them.
Yeah, see, that's what I've started doing. I got my whole reptile room, I got a cheap humidifier that I've had for a couple of years, but then I actually found a sell on the reptile, not reptile mist, it's a vapor, Vicks vapor mist. And it's like, okay, so I just put water in it and it does the trick and it'll mist that whole reptile room. And when you walk in the afternoon, after I shut it off at 6 a.m., that thing is so humid. It's like upper 70s with the massive humidity. And that's, my zebra skinks are in there. My Peter Bandit skinks are in there. And I have noticed some shed stuff with them, so I have to make sure that I still put water on them. But overall, yeah, like it's not that hard. And then you shut it off during the day, let the stuff start to dry out. That way it holds back the mold a little bit more. As long as the animal is hydrated enough, then heating up is not going to kill it.
Yeah, I think I turn mine off as soon as it gets 88 degrees. And their enclosures, I'll turn off their lights.
Okay. So you don't keep them on all day? You get it to
no, if I did that, they'd die. Especially since it was like 95 degrees today.
Oh, so you're keeping them in a place where you don't really have the air conditioning?
No, because there's just too much. There's air conditioning to the room they're in, but it doesn't work that well towards them.
I had the same issue when I lived in the apartment, and I would turn my lights off for about 2 hours or an hour every day, about an hour or two before I got home. So it would cool down the apartment. Even my bearded dragons would be dehydrated if I just kept the lights on constantly, because that air conditioning was just so bad in that apartment. It was, yeah, like people don't understand that these animals can die from from too much heat. As a matter of fact, bearded dragons will over poop. They will not be able to control their poop. And so they will poop in their enclosure, which they don't like. So that stresses them out in a bad way where it's like, I just want to get out of here. And so they're going to go glass surfing either before and after they poop in the enclosure because they can't control it because they got too hot. It's really not one of those fun things. And the zebras, since, I have a 4-foot tank for them, they'll go to the other side and go sit in the shade and just get away from the heat and then come back and forth. They'll sit there in the morning and do it. As a matter of fact, this is Nubs. See, I got these zebra skinks for free. He's got a bad tail. But look at him basking, and he's keeping his feet off the ground. Do fire skinks do that?
Not really.
Not really? That's interesting. Is it just because you may not have gotten the hot spot hot enough for that?
There was a time where I did get, like, the hot spot got like to 100 something.
Okay.
And they just avoided it in general. Okay,
see, that's good to know.
Yeah, but once I fixed it and got it down to like 95, 96, they comfortably just lay under it.
See, he's got half of his stuff on and half of it off. So, yeah, that goes back to your hotspot stuff. Now, going back to feeding, let's see if I can find these real quick. So this is the feeding of the fire skink. Looks the same as the zebras. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. I'm trying to find another one. There was another one that I seen. I thought this was very cute. There was another one that I saw that I thought was a little. Is this the death roll? This is this person thinks this is a death roll. This is not a death roll. Have you seen them actually death roll?
Once. It wasn't my animal, but someone in the group posted it that I'm in, and yeah, it was a real death roll. It was like 5 or 6 rolls.
Yes, like that's the thing. Like my Peter Banded skinks have death rolled, and it's like, but they do it to try to escape. A healthy Peter Banded skink, like adult male, my snoot, the one that I said was trying to breed, he is so hard to hold. It's like holding a fish. None of my other ones are that strong. Like, you can tell a healthy Peter Banded skink by its strength. And a healthy adult male Peter Banded skink is like holding a fish. My zebras are not as hard, but they are still very hard. And they will swing around and draw blood with biting. Is that the same for fire skinks?
I have 3 of them that will bite with maximum effort.
See, what that animal was doing was, I call it the bulldog. What do you call it? Because it's trying to kill the actual worm.
I just view it as head shaking.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's just what a bulldog does. It's trying to take I've even seen the emerald green tree skink do this. Like, try to stick it in a corner and like that to kill it, to try to smash it as a tool. And so that's what they're doing. They're trying to shake it to rip it. And that's what the jaw is there for. You even see these jaws on fish, and that's all I can think of is how they lock. and so they can do that. Like I've seen it on fish now, and it's like, oh crap, I don't want to get bit by that fish. My Cuban nightingales, their mouths open up like this, and it's terrifying. That bite ain't nothing. Ain't nothing compared to a skink bite. Like it's terrifying. This Cuban nightingale, just like and then it'll reach around and actually almost get you like that. Whereas skink will, and it will actually hurt a little bit. Even the Peter Banded skinks, almost nobody's ever been bit by one. They're so docile, and that's it. Now, so the death roll is getting away. So there's not much left of feeding. I mean, what do you feed them? Anything in particular?
It's usually mealworms, roaches, and dubia roaches and crickets. Those are the 3 staples.
Okay.
I'll give them waxworms. Some of them liked hornworms. And I've had terrible luck with black soldier fly larvae.
Okay. Why is that?
Just none of them like it.
Okay. That's interesting to know. That's very cool.
And like even the babies who eat anything that move, even they don't like them.
Okay. That's what I was going to say. Okay. We haven't gotten to the part yet where we talk about how these animals interact with people yet. How have you seen them interact with other animals?
Well, I have one dog, and they just ignore her, and the dog ignores them.
Okay. And that's my zebras. I've got video of them taking note of my Peter Banded skinks. Oh, they'll take food right out of my hands. Do the zebras or does the fire skinks do that?
No, but they'll eat on my hands when I tongue feed.
Okay.
I train the babies from when they're 3 days old, and up until the point they get sold, they all get tongue fed by my hands.
Okay. Well, this is what the is that the right one? I've got one where it's the. See, we were talking about misting, and so this is Carrie before he passed away, just misting the deal. And so he's drinking the mist that I dropped. This is the gecko. Sorry, I have to remember to share this stuff. This is the gecko, my Peter Banded skink that's blind. And like I said, he's bumping into me because he can't see me, but he'll listen to my voice. This one's actually a good one.
I think your screen might have froze.
This one. You see how gently he took that one from me?
No, the fire skinks are very aggressive with that.
See,
They strike hard on the bugs.
See, this is them hunting. They're actually hunting. I know I'm sharing this one. They are actually my zebras are hunting red runners. Here. Is that how they hunt? Very similar, like very fast, very deliberate.
Yeah, but they'll also ambush hunters too.
Yeah.
They'll have their head stick out of their little burrows, and a cricket passes by, and they'll snag it.
See, talking about biting hard, this is Gecko eating some turkey meat. He's lapping it up. You see how he kind of just chomps it?
The fire skinks go pretty nuts over chicken.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, roasted chicken.
Yeah, see, this is turkey meat because he's blind and he has struggle with that. All of these guys are very intelligent, and we actually see that. I'll find it some other time and upload it. This right here. So, have you seen anything else out of them with feeding, because they do strike hard. Gecko gets a mouthful of, like I said, Gecko will actually set his nose on a worm, lift up, and strike. And so sometimes that worm will have moved, and so he will get a mouthful of dirt.
I've seen them. I've seen it once. One of my babies, I was tongue feeding it, and it threw its food in the air and caught it.
Oh, that's cool.
I have a picture of it with like the worm leaving its mouth, but it's all blurry.
Okay.
But some of them will shake it real hard and then throw it against like the wall of the enclosure.
See, that's what I was talking about with the behavioral. They're actually using tools to kill the whatever they're trying to eat. So they actually do. Like, I've seen emerald green tree skinks, which are way smaller than these animals. And we'll get to the neuroscience of that here in a minute. One of the things that I have seen with my zebras that you might try, if I grab them, like, I'm top loaded. You saw how that thing was from the top. I think I paid $10 for that enclosure. It's a 4 foot long by 2 foot wide. And so that's how they can get that basking temperature difference so well in it. And so what I've learned is if I reach my hand in there and I go upside down and I actually like lower it beneath them and then kind of come up at them, they'll lick it and they'll actually usually allow me to pick them up. This is what it ends up looking like. Like, I literally just looks like that. Like, I'm not even holding this thing and he's looking out the window because he's enjoying it. Right here. He lives with this guy. They live together and they're still curious about each other. And I see that exact behavior when I put Peter-banded skinks up against them. I don't know if it's territory or if it's... This is why I always recommend to people to introduce your animals with glass or something between them, because they don't know. They don't know what glass is. And I've had people, well, you don't need to introduce Peter-banded skink. It's like, no, introduce them so you can understand what their actually motives are. Are they trying to strike at each other? Are they just flicking their tongue like they're trying to figure out what that other animal is? They live together and they're still trying to figure out what the other animal is. Very curious animals. And this is all skinks. Like, I don't know any skinks that's not curious like this. And there might be a point behind this. But, you know, the way they treat humans, this is a Peter-banded skink. I set it on my shoulders. I like to let my Peter-banded skinks run on my back because they don't have very sharp claws. This is Nubs. This is the one who's missing its fingers. The zebra. And he's just back there just... This is also Nubs. They like to climb to the top of my head.
Yeah, same with my fire skinks. They always like to try to get on top of my head.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, maybe just being up on the high ground to see everything.
That is one. That is one reason why. That is absolutely true. We have noticed in all reptiles that they actually map their territory. I actually have video of me talking about how these animals will actually, they not only map their territory, but they play sometimes doing it, and they have a delay, and you can see that delay. So animals don't just turn on a dime. They will actually usually have a delay, but they will also map. And even though they don't actually have to live that life every single second of every day, they will still map that. So having the high ground helps them to see their territory. So they can go, oh, it's literally my bearded dragons. Every time I see them on the high ground, I think of Lion King, the king of all I survey. That's literally the same purpose. Plus, with them on top of you, are you really going to eat them if they're on top of you? So I'm sure it brings them a little bit of comfort that way. Would you agree? Hello?
Yeah, just thinking about whenever I was playing video games, they all like to climb up my head and try to get under my headset.
Ah, that's cool. Trying to find that spot at the high ground where that's very interesting, I think. That is very interesting because they do. Like, that's literally you. One thing that I've noticed from like my emerald skink days, they will get between the screen enclosure and the netting that I have in there because they like having something touch their back and their front. This is also why I did an episode with 2 breeders, and the breeder was a blue-tongue skink breeder and a Savannah monitor breeder. Both species like to have their backs and bottoms touch. That way, predators can't run off with them. It calms them down. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, because they intentionally wedged themselves underneath my headphones.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. So now they get that wide view of the landscape to map it, and they get the comfort of having like rocks, being in between rocks. It's very fascinating, and that does have an effect on their medulla and their cerebellum. I'm actually doing episodes right now off of a study that's actually done. And this is where this brain actually comes from, is that study. And it's very fascinating. They did such a great job with this. So this is a fire skink. This is a 4D. Yeah, how cool is that? How freaking cool. Have you ever seen this before?
I mean, I've seen their actual brain before, but not something like this.
See, the problem with seeing the actual brain outside of the skull is that this medulla is actually loose. So the medulla right under the red spot, the piece where it goes into the spine, it's loose. So if you see a brain outside of the skull, you're not getting the full picture of the medulla. This has a type of kink to it where it actually goes down and up because it needs more surface area because they're a burial species. And so I've done an episode on this. And what that study says is that because it's a lizard, the cerebellum, the red, is the key. Like you can break every species down to limbless, reduced limbs, quadruplex that are arboreal, quadruplex that are territorial, like that live on the land, and then the multifactional ones with 4 limbs. And this would be a multi one, and it literally all lizard cerebellum start to creep up the actual optic tantrum. And what that does is it increases the actual, if they're underneath the ground like that, they'll actually increase the thickness of that cerebellum. Cerebellum has a control on the muscles and bones and stuff like that. It's a networking deal. It's not actually attached to the optic tantrum, but that medulla is attached to the nervous system and hormones and things like that. But that leads into that right above the red is that optic tantrum. And what I don't like about this video, I don't like 2 things. You can't see the thalamus, the white matter, and you can't see the optic nerve. The optic nerve on a reptile is underneath the brain. So that optic nerve is taking in sensory and sending it straight to that optic tantrum. And that optic tantrum does have a modeling part of empathy. When we look at this human brain, we actually see these spots inside are what their optic tantrum is from. That's it. And so our brains have actually sphered around it, and that white matter has allowed that. So this is modeling is right here on the left hemisphere. So if I yawn and you yawn, it's actually that hemisphere that's going off right there. It's actually not reaching the cerebral cortex in the back. It's actually dropping off right there and then heading back. And so that's why you smile when I smile, or that you will yawn if I yawn. Reptiles have that. I believe the spherical nature of our brains and our imagination's right here. So I believe, because you can't ever be a lizard, but you can put yourself in the shoes of a lizard through imagination. So I believe that you're connecting this to this through childhood. And that means people can put themselves in other people's shoes better. And then as you get older, the frontal lobe actually connects these together even more and becomes a brake system. And so that's very interesting. And that's why it's very important to look at the forebrain of this thing. The forebrain is right above the optic tantrum. And then above that is the OL stalk, which leads down into in front of the eyes. So that's the information that OL stalk, when they lick the air like snakes do, they're collecting that data, and that's actually being used right there, and that goes straight into the forebrain. And that's why right there is our OL stalk. And that's why when we smell, we use our imagination. We see an imagination, or not our imagination, but a memory. It attaches to our memory so well. That's why. So I always imagine these animals going, okay, so as they smell the air, that will actually go through that and automatically bring up a memory. And I'm sure that's very useful. But some of that stuff, and the reason why, like the optic tantrum, why they would need that modeling is because what that will do is, okay, so if every animal around them is terrified, I watched my emerald swifts the other day. Like all three were lined up in this weird, like two over here, one back here, and they're all exactly the same. Like they're all fours hyped up. This one leaps because it saw my hand move. These two leaped exactly the same way because of that optic tantrum. Like I said, there's a delay for a reason, because that thalamus goes underneath both of those. It doesn't really connect those two like it does in our brains. It connects them by traveling underneath. So they're getting limited connection between those two, and that's why they have that delay. But that's also why they have like faster reflexes than we probably do, because they need that. That's what modeling was for, and we just were able to attach that to our imagination to increase what type of empathy we have, because we needed that as a species. So that would automatically send that down that medulla, because it comes right off the optic tantrum. And that makes that animal move. But then it'll send that information back to the forebrain. The forebrain is where the mapping of the environment goes, because it's where the memory will go. And what I find interesting about the fire skink, or all skinks, is that snakes, when you look at a snake's nerves here, so this is from that study. So these first two are snakes. You see it?
Yeah, I'm looking.
So you see the OL, it comes back and it pushes the forebrain back over the optic tantrum, and that leads down. Well, here's some skinks down here. just like the fire skink. See, this is a chameleon right here. And the one above it's a flying lizard, and then a bearded dragon. They don't have the OO stalk like the skinks and the snakes do, but the skinks don't seem to push back the OL stalk over the optic tantum. It seems to elongate the actual forebrain. It's a very interesting hypothesis and stuff that I've got for these things, because they do have imaginations. Have you ever thought about a reptile having an imagination?
No, I haven't actually.
So one experiment that I get so upset with people because nobody listens to what I'm saying. I loved having Liam on because he actually listened. He tried it. I give suggestions on studies that people can do right there, like an experiment, and nobody does it. They just kind of write me off. Last weekend, I was some guy at the Reptile Herpetological Society meeting had his dwarf retics out. The ladies in front of me were playing with them. And so what I did was I started doing the slow blink. I do it to all my animals. I've seen the emerald swifts or emerald skinks that I've got, and they will actually, they'll like, and then I'll do the slow blink, and then all of a sudden they'll be breathing just fine. So I do this to these, because I've learned this from stray cats. And I've learned this from Peter Bandit skinks as well. So it means I'm not your predator, because a predator is going to do this. It's just going to stare at you. I want to eat you, so I'm going to stare at you. And then if you're scared, you're also going to like stare, like, oh, I'm scared of you. So it's the slow blinking lets that animal know you are not its predator and you are not scared of it, so you're not going to hurt it out of fear. Like, it's because, once again, it has that modeling. It recognizes that other animals fear because it has to for a survival tactic. Because if all the other animals are running out of the woods, it needs to run too. Like, it's a survival thing. And so we can actually say from that, so these retics are out here and they're just playing around. They're in exploratory mode. That's the thing to remember. So I started slow blinking to these animals, and then I would turn my head away from them and look back at them, because I learned that from Peter Bandit skinks. When I would introduce them together with glass between, so Carrie's a male Peter Bandit skink and Snoot was a male Peter Bandit skink, and they were just locked eyes. Eventually Carrie goes, okay, and immediately Snoot jumps to the window trying to get a sniff of him. It means the exact same thing, turning your back on these animals. I've got myself doing it with a giraffe like that. I know that sounds weird, doing it with a giraffe. I've done it with a giraffe. Yeah. I probably shouldn't make that motion while I say that, but okay. And so I would spin around and that giraffe would go and go back to eating. Well, I just told it that I'm not afraid of you and I'm not your predator. What do we expect the giraffe to do more than take note? Because it's these humans all day long. And I did this with like a gazelle or something like that, and it did the same thing back to me. It would go away, turn its back, run back. It's a sign that we're not scared of each other, and we're kind of trying to communicate. So these retics started moving towards me immediately when I did that to them. So later on that, everybody's like, oh, we don't care. Well, that's what you do with stray cats. It shouldn't work on retics. It's fine. So I'm holding one of these retics, and the lady brings her son over and he goes, I want to hold it. I want to hold it. I'm like, well, do the slow blink. Do the slow blink. He wouldn't listen to me just like everybody else. His mom finally goes, do the slow blink. Try it. Give it a try. The moment that he goes, that snake goes from here, heads right for him like that, because they're already in that exploratory mode, And now you've just told it that you're not afraid of it and you're not there to eat it. So it's going, well, I'm going to go look at this over here. I'm going to go explore this. So now this animal is moving towards him, and the mom goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe that would work." I'm sitting back. I'm not mad at these people for that. I'm mad at everybody else that won't even try it. Like I'm asking you to slow blink. I'm not asking people to do something like put your finger up a reptile's ass. You know what I mean? What are some of the things that you've seen that works to calm these animals down? You've talked about some of this stuff, right?
Usually, if I'm wearing a hoodie, I'll put them in my hoodie pocket. It's nice and dark.
Yeah.
So that usually just calms them down.
I like that.
Or if I take them out to do my weighing and, checkups on them, I'll put them in my cargo shorts pockets, and they usually just stay there and sleep.
Okay. So going back to the imagination, you can do this test, but I will preference this. It will give you a headache. There is no vertebrate that we know of whose right side of the brain doesn't control the left side of the body. That's the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. This is every single vertebrate we know of. Brain does this. There, you would have to prove that vertebrate does something different for this to actually be that way. So if you want to prove that your right brain holds your imagination, what you do is just try to look straight and then try to think of imagine something. Your eyes will start to dart to the left because your right side of the brain controls the left side of your body. And then vice versa. If you try to pull memory retrieval is actually in the left side of your brain. So that right there, up and down is a thing too. And I've noticed this with my bearded dragon, Calm Fancy, that when I drop my phone on the couch, he can't see my phone anymore. But he will take his whole head and do this with his left eye, showing us that he is dumb. He is imagining something down there. I'm sure he's imagining a worm or something down there, but he is imagining. It's something we should see in venomous since they're ambush predators. Are they favoring their left side? This would be something very interesting to see because the reptile brain, and with a skink having a longer forebrain, would actually be very interesting to see the differences because that might mean their territory is larger than most animals their size. It might mean that they have more memory capacity. Another thing that I've come to a conclusion on is I accidentally was looking at a brain for iguanas. And I came across an actual brain, not just a model from MRIs, but an actual brain. And I'm like, wow, okay, so it looks like a reptile brain, but oh no, that's a house cat. I'm like, oh. And then I went and found the iguana brain, almost identical. But the house cat's forebrain wraps around that optic tantrum more than a reptile's brain. And what you see in that cat's brain more than you'll see in most reptiles' brain, besides the wrapping around, they'll have more gray matter between those two. And then the wrinkling of the brain. So I believe, and the iguana brain actually had more white matter between the optic tantrum and the forebrain than a bearded dragon does. So they might actually have more emotional intelligence than a bearded dragon. And as we look at this skink brain, and kind of all the skink brains kind of did the same thing, where they're not really good at showing you the in between, the white matter, but there's kind of not a lot of darkness there, so there might be more white matter between those. But if their imagination and their memory retrieval is further up, then it's not connecting very well to their optic tantum, so they're unlikely to get the vast emotional intelligence. See, where a cat will go, okay, so you're sad. I'm going to go over and make you not so sad because I empathize with you because I understand your emotional state. These reptiles, I've seen my bearded dragons take note of my actual emotional state. They didn't come over to try to comfort me, no. But they did behave a little differently. Like they hid and kept an eye on me. Like, what is happening? Why is this guy doing this? I don't understand. But yet they still noticed it. So it's very fascinating how this actually works. Because all our vertebrates' brains come from the same source. So they literally have our brains, just different. And that linear probably allows for more of a faster reflex. But I would love to hear back later on when you start looking at these skinks and them ambushing. Does the ambush actually seem to come more from the left side? Like they're favoring the left side when they ambush? I would love to know that if you actually kind of find that now, because it's kind of hard because their view is that 260. So I had to learn where my bearded dragon was looking. It's like, no, I know Pitch, the bitch, doesn't actually care about people. She's massively indifferent to human beings. So if it looks like she's looking at humans, no, she's looking beyond the humans. So what is beyond the humans that she's looking at? That's always how I think of like Pitch. I have to know her personality to fully understand this. So it's very fascinating how this actually works. But the longitude of this, so snakes might actually have more emotional intelligence than skinks, maybe because their forebrain kind of laps over that optic tantum a little bit more than skinks do. But that skink seems to have a longer freaking deal. Now, the reason why I brought up the wrinkling, everybody uses this smooth brain as stupid. It's like, no. Can you tell me why our human brain, our forebrains crease?
That's for more critical thinking?
Yes. Our memories and everything are actually stored all over the forebrain. Our imaginations and our memory pull from that. So what that does is it creates more surface area. What's different about a reptile that they might not want that? What's something like blue tongues have that went at birth? There's studies that actually say that blue tongue babies are just as smart as blue tongue adults because their brains don't crease. They're smooth. So their DNA is passing along that information, that survival information. It is literally built into their brains where ours is not. We have to adapt by using these creases. They still have memory, but it should limit it. The functionality should be the most important thing. And I'm very curious about the functionality of skinks because they do seem to be a little more decisive, like quicker in their reactions and their actual decision making. Don't you think, than other animals?
Oh, yeah, because mine studied me. They know my schedule. So they know when I'm home and when I'm not home.
Yes. Bearded dragons still do that. They just seem to be slower. Pitch, the bitch. She wanted to lay eggs for weeks. And so she was like just going ape shit. Like just running every which way you could possibly think of. I started walking to the bathroom because I was letting her free roam. Because otherwise I just hear this all day. And it's like just like, come on, girl. So she would freak out my mountain horn dragon so much. Like he was all puffed up, like, what the hell's going on, man? And so I started walking to the bathroom. So you have to go through the door into the hall and across the way. Pitch comes running in behind me because she wanted me to throw her in the tub so she could take a bath to try to poop, or because she probably wanted to try to get the eggs out. But it's kind of one of those things where she's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I really want, but this sounds right. So they do remember. They just seem to take longer to make decisions than skinks do, but skinks still have that delay. My emerald green tree skink, I have plants in there for him when I had him, and they literally would run around, and he would stop for about 30 minutes or 30 seconds, and then he'd go for about a minute and go play on the plant, and then he'd stop. And you could just see him looking around. So he's trying to map out what he wants to do. And it took him about 30 seconds. And then he'd go for about a minute and a half. And so it's like they're taking faster decision making. I'm wondering if that's something that comes along. And we could study that. Their decision making, that may actually come along with that forebrain. And that may be one of those reasons why they're so fast to jump away from everything, because they've kind of made that decision already. Because they know that I'm not dangerous. But they still like looking outside. They still like exploring. They may not like the outside. You were talking about that before, that your animals, that especially the wild caught ones, don't like the outside.
Oh no, they freak out once they see the sunlight and all that.
Very fascinating. That's very fascinating. This goes back to what people talk about with the microhabitats. Maybe these skinks are not staying in the sun that much. It's very interesting. Now, is there any questions that you have? Any thoughts? Any takeaways? Because I think we've pretty much covered it all.
I think it's funny because my skinks will stare at me, and they're either wondering if they're going to get held and taken out or if they're going to get fed. So you can always see them eyeballing me, just wondering what I'm going to do.
Yeah. Oh, man. Pitch behaves like a skink. Pitch will, where the other beardies are like, are you going to do something? Are we going to do something? Is something happening? Pitch is like, I saw you open the door. I saw you open the door. It's like a cat. Are you going to bring me something? Are you going to bring something? Are you bringing something in? Are you bringing food in? That's my first thought every time she comes running at me when I open the front door in her enclosure, because my beardies can see from the front door. They're not in my reptile room. Neither is my mountain horn dragon. But because they don't need that humidity. So it's very interesting. And I'm wondering if that forebrain link is actually what does that. And since we can't see the shadow between the forebrain and the optic tantrum, I'm wondering if you pull out the brain of one of these fire skinks, or most skinks, are you going to see more? So would there be a chance for them to have more emotional intelligence than most reptiles? Might, because it's about the connections. Empathy and emotional intelligence is not about just having it, because they have the imagination, they have the modeling, they understand what emotions are, because they have the exact same brain. It's just set up differently. And their genetics allows them to have kept information from their parents because they need it for survival. That's why their brains don't crease. It's not that they're stupid, quite the contrary. And that's the one thing that I don't like about this version, is that thalamus, we don't see that, the white matter. And I believe that we would see more white matter between that than a bearded dragon. And that means there's more connections between the forebrain and the optic tantrum. Now, that cerebellum does not attach to the optic tantrum. it wraps around it because of the way the head's probably modeled. And it's very thick because they're a burial species. And I am working on this. There's a massive study. I spent an hour today trying to do a video on the first two graphs that they've got, and their mapping of the brain as a whole is so complicated to understand that I'm trying to figure out how to describe it best because I barely understand it. But it does actually add up, and I think that graph will help out with breeding because it'll show us how these animals, because how many people realized that the skink brain has a bigger forebrain than most snakes compared to body size, compared to brain size, but yet their oral stalk is smaller, but yet still massive compared to lizard. I'm sure people could kind of guess that, but to actually see it and put that together. Anything else that you can think of? Why did you see the brain?
Well, it was a deformity.
Oh, deformity.
The baby hatched out with a hole in its head and its brain was sticking out.
Wow. Deformities are very interesting. We didn't talk about them yet. We kind of see one here. The kink in the back of the tail. Because I got these skinks. Yeah, right here is a good one. The lady gave me these skinks because the back of the tail is kinked because the mother had too many babies, and so the eggs got crushed. There was 3 of them, and she didn't want people to think she was a bad breeder, so she gave them to me, and I have just loved these things. These things are amazing. I'm sure fire skinks are super similar. I mean, not exact, but very similar. Have you ever met anybody that's, I mean, can you talk on deformities that you've seen? And have you ever met anybody that's actually from the area or visited the area where fire skinks are from?
So I've seen 3 deformities. There's the baby with the hole in the skull and its brain sticking out. There was the baby who hatched with the fully developed head, missing its body, but had all its organs, and had a full tail.
Wow.
And I had one baby with the massive spinal kink that fixed itself.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm very curious about that. They had a vet on Animal at Home a while back, and a turtle did that. It's very interesting. Do you know why? You know how they did that?
No idea, but
Neither do I at this moment. I could think of especially being young. There was a human. He was 18 months old. He got internally decapitated and had like a 13-hour surgery. Fully came back because his cells were still what is that? The stem cells. And so he was able to make a full recovery because of that. And as long as the ATP, the stuff that the cells eat, is fine, animals can make a recovery as long as they're getting that ATP. That's the energy that the cells eat for anybody at home. Now, have you ever met anybody that is from that area where these animals are from?
No, but I am funding a trip to head out there next year.
Oh, cool. Can you talk on that?
So I got most of my morphs from an importer.
Okay.
Outback Reptiles, and with them, we are sending a good friend of mine out to Africa where they find all these cool morphs next year.
Okay. That's cool.
'Cause before there was one person who would find them all, and he had a special hunting ground that he did, but he died like 1 or 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So they recently found it again, but it's in between two warring tribes.
Oh,
So
shit.
no one's bothered to go look there since.
Okay. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. When I was living in the apartment, there was an Asian guy that showed up to my door for DoorDash for a Chinese restaurant or something a couple of times. And I was like, hey, where are you from? He goes, Vietnamese. He goes, Vietnam. I'm like, okay, come look at the skink. Like, I literally invited him into the apartment because I didn't order Chinese. He showed up at my door accident twice and said, no, I didn't order the Chinese. I'm sorry. But come here and look at this emerald green tree skink. Tell me about this skink. Have you seen this? He goes, yes, they're everywhere. That's so cool. Like, it's like, that's cool. Like, that's fine. I was walking my bearded dragons. I outfitted a stroller. And so I actually have the little carry case, and I have been known to throw my zebras in there from time to time and take them out to the lake with the dragons. I have a little net in the back that I'll throw that case in so they'll be able to see everything and still be kind of tucked away from everything. So they get the mental stimuli without being too overly stressed. And they get some sun, some actual real sun. And so this lady, a couple of people, they walked by and they were like, oh my God, I've seen those. I've been to Africa. Oh my God, they're like everywhere. They run around everywhere. So the zebra skinks apparently are just like our blue tongues here in Missouri. Not our blue tongues, our blue tails. Our blue tail lizards here in Missouri are everywhere. They're the same ones you might get at like Petco or PetSmart. Like they're that lizard. Like they're everywhere here in Missouri. It's really cool when you meet people that are actually from these areas. Yeah, but that sounds fun. Like you said you're sending somebody, but you also said you were going?
No, I'm not going.
Okay. Sorry,
I don't have the time or really the tolerance to be out there.
I understand.
Most of my trip, I would probably just be stuck on the toilet.
Oh God! Oh, I can understand that. I totally can. There's things in Africa that's you don't really want to catch that.
Yeah, so
yeah, I understand.
And then the person I'm sending, his whole life is reptiles and stuff. So it's an exciting trip for him to go and see this.
Cool. I'm happy for you. I'm happy that you guys got something going. Like that sounds so cool. And it makes such a big difference to have people in the community that you can talk to. It's so fascinating and just wonderful, isn't it? Can you tell us any other moments that you've had with, like, what's some of the favorite moments that you've had with your fire skinks?
Hatching out my first set of babies, because up until me, no one had done anything with a xanthic gene.
Okay.
So I proved that all headed xanthics show visual signs as babies.
Cool. So
like the babies are like 5 times darker than normals, and some of them have weird spotting patterns.
Okay. See, I'm not much on the morph stuff. I'm really more personality and brain guy. I don't know if you could tell, but I got a little excited about behavioral stuff and the brain stuff and actually trying to figure that out more. Like that's my bag. I've literally, this study that I'm trying to make the video on, they have a whole chart of genes that the phenol groups that they actually use for testing these animals so we could test their cerebellums. And it's so complex and it's real for me. Like, to me, that's where breeding is. Whereas I don't like the Pinnet square stuff. I'm not a big fan of that. I see in terms of proteins and protein twists and connections and that matter because I'm a polymer chemist focused on medical tech. Like I said, I studied polymers and DNAs of polymers. So that's what I studied. So that's more where I'm at with morphs. I don't really look at like a pieball python and go, oh my God, that morph's so cool. I'm like, no, that's a really cool color. Let's go over here and look at this lizard. It's like, that's really how that works for me. So I don't know, but any type of behavioral stuff or anything else you want to talk about? Any questions you got for me?
I mean, I can show you how easy it is to grab them.
Yeah, if you want to, absolutely.
One of my adults is out right now, so hold on. Okay. So right there. Are you there?
Yes.
So that's my big adult male, and I can just grab him.
Yeah. That's really cool. No, that's really interesting. And he's just like, no, we're cool. Like, that's cool.
And then he just goes back to his hide.
Yeah, he's not even worried. He's just like, no, we're good.
Yeah, this is the one that really freaks out when I take him outside.
Oh, okay.
So.
And wild caught. Oh, that's cool though, man. Like that is super cool.
I have a lot of them are like that for me. It's usually the captive bred ones I can't grab so easily.
Okay.
Because they know my intentions, so they just want to avoid me.
My zebra skinks are captive bred as well. And they wiggle when I grab them from above like that. Like I said, though, but if I actually stick my hand in there and let them sniff it and they don't run away, they'll usually let me scoop them up from beneath. So you might try that with the captive bred stuff. That's interesting. Like, I like that. That's very fascinating. Because they do remember.
And I'm very glad that one's never tried to bite me, because that one would hurt.
Yes, I'm telling people, man, skinks are the cutest thing, and they are almost as hard of a bite as a Savannah. Savannah's a little bit harder, but yeah, they're a pretty hard bite. And it's pretty fascinating that these animals are so much like smaller than a beardy, but yet they're almost more intelligent. And that may come to that forebrain length. That may have an explanation for that. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Any takeaways?
Yeah, they have a hierarchy.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about the hierarchy yet. That was one of the things we did have on there. Can you talk about the hierarchy?
So, I did have a group of 4 males together.
Okay.
And I had 0 fights. And they were together for almost 2 years. And they had 1 disagreement in that entire time.
Well, I've noticed my zebras, they live together. And Nubs is the one. That's why I wonder if his fingers got bitten off, but it's most likely bad sheds. Because usually if they bully them, because that was another thing I was going to talk about. Cruelty. Remind me of cruelty. The fingers, like, usually when a reptile starts bullying, they'll just continue to bully. So that's why I think the fingers were shed problems, because the other 2 don't have the problem. I've seen them fight over worms, but now what they do is they'll take the worm and like leave each other, like get away from each other. But overall, they don't really care. They don't really like fight if one tries to lay on top of the other. They just kind of go with it, even if it's the smaller one. But when food time comes and I start feeding them, Blackbeard's the biggest. And then the middle child, I call him the middle child. I can't remember. Charlie, I named him. because there's 3 of them in Charlie's Angels, and he's kind of the middle one. And then Nubs is the small one. And so Nubs came with a little, like, it looked like tail rot. Like, so I put some iodine on it, but actually the vet cut it off and they seared it. And so that's what that was. So I used some betadine on it just to kind of make sure that it wouldn't get infected. But yeah, there's kind of a hierarchy when they eat. So you will find that Nub stays out longer than the other 2 because he can't really bury himself because he's missing those front fingers. So he kind of gets a little more food than the others do because I go in there to feed the Peter Banded skinks. Now the Peter Banded skinks, that's interesting. That hierarchy's not. I don't know. When I thought the girl was pregnant because she looked like she was fatter, it's like the males all seem to stop eating. But I don't know what. But Snoot is usually the most aggressive to go get food. And he is the big adult male. He's the one, if you try to handle him wrong, he's like a fish. Like, that's literally, like, that's not even a joke. Like, it's like holding, like, oh shit. Like, to give him medication is rough. Or Carrie, the old male, would just sit on my shoulders for hours. And eventually, like, he got used to getting fed with a syringe because he just wouldn't eat worms because he was old. And so you could tell he actually liked that stuff. So that's why Carrie was my favorite, because he just lay with me. I've got video of him just laying on my shoulders for hours. And he just like, oh, we're good. Do they, if you rub them, do they do the little turbo? The little zooms? Do they do the zooms if you rub them? Where
one did when he would run away from me.
Was he captive or wild caught?
Wild.
Okay. See, the zoom is very interesting because after a while, Carrie just stopped zooming. And most of the others kind of followed suit with the Peter Banded skinks, but they'll still kind of zoom. But at first, man, it's like, no, don't touch me. I'm zoom. I'm out. But then they'll just zoom for a minute and then stop, like slow down. Yeah, they get the zooms. It's very fascinating.
There are a couple of the captives that are just almost impossible to catch.
That's cool, though. That's a very interesting deal. And that may go back to, did you breed them yourself or did you buy them?
Yeah, I bred them myself and I've had them their whole life.
Did the parents, was that something that the parents adapted towards?
Well, it's interesting because the clutch I raised up earlier, the father bites and wiggles and tries to get away from me, and the mom just wiggles and gets away. But all the babies are super calm.
Okay.
Only one of them is slightly crazy.
Okay.
That is, of course, it's the one I chose to keep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of cool with the crazy ones a little bit. I do like that one. Keep them slim enough. What did somebody say the other day? Keep them slim enough to be aggressive or something like that. Mean and lean. Keep them mean and lean. Lean and mean. No, I'm cool with that. That's little spice to them. It's all right. Now, have you ever seen them actually be cruel? They have a hierarchy. So have they bullied? When we're talking about cruelty, we are looking at them doing something that hurts another animal that does not help their survival and seems to bring them joy.
When they fight, they fight. It's a take no prisoners kind of fighting.
Kind of like for survival? Does it seem more like a survival thing, or does it seem like they're fighting?
Well, it's been a fight for dominance
Okay.
because some individuals just don't get along. Like if you put two alpha females together, you're gonna have a very bloody mess.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm very interested with that.
And I've had more issues with the females fighting than the males.
That's very interesting. And there might be something to that. I'm thinking that, when they lay eggs, what were their emotional state? So when the eggs got consummated, what was the state of the lizards? Did that have an impact on the behavior of the...
No, actually, it wasn't even breeding season.
Okay. But on top of all of that, it's very interesting because I don't know if you would call that cruel or not. Like, I don't know. Like, that's kind of one of those catch things. Because when we look at the cat brain versus the iguana brain, are iguanas actually cruel? Do they actually go out there and kill anything because they don't eat meat? Really? So does an iguana go out there and kill things? No, probably not. And so due to the brain wrapping around the optic tantum and them having emotional intelligence and being able to learn like we do with the wrinkling, the cat might actually find happiness in being cruel to other animals. Whereas the iguana may never find happiness in being cruel, so there's no reason for it to be cruel because it's limited in its emotional intelligence because of the smooth brain. Because they don't need a wrinkly brain because they need to keep the genetics that allow them that knowledge to survive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of... So I'm always curious about that. So that may be why, we don't really see reptiles that are really cruel. Because, my skinks will bite me, and then once they're out and I'm not treating them that way and they've kind of calmed down, they'll usually just let me pick them up. They won't try to wiggle out or anything. So it's interesting how all that works. Because Blackbeard got me once right between the fingers, and of course I bled.
I've had a couple of them just randomly bite me. I had one of my males out, a smaller male. And I'd had him out for like 5 minutes, him just chilling on my back. And he just bit my neck for no reason.
Okay, that's interesting. That is very interesting. Is there anything else you can think of?
Although I know they do have a preference for isopods.
Okay.
So if I gave them multiple food options, they would always go for the isopod first.
I do know that they like my zebras like the super worms better than the mealworms. But they love the red runners because the red runners run. So they get to chase them.
Yeah, that's what I get crickets for them to hunt.
Do they really get into that?
The babies do.
Okay.
Because you'll just see them start to all come out and start eating.
So what are some of the takeaways from this that we should take away that you think everybody should start thinking about? And what did you take away?
That every skink's its own individual.
That's for sure.
You will never get two skinks that are like...
Yeah, like I said, Blackbeard will bite you. Charlie will wiggle, but he doesn't really bite. Freaking Nubs is kind of, Carrie Houdini, my Peter Bandit skink, has escaped multiple times.
I had one like that too. His name was Harold.
God, I found her 2 days. I found her the next morning, but broken. She took broken with her this time because she'd escaped before. Very smart girl. And it's like, I was trying to be nice. And it's like, okay, girl, fine. And so, We have the gecko. Like I said, he is a Peter banded skink. I named him the gecko because when I first got him, I didn't know he was hard of sight or blind. Super intelligent. He's one of 2 animals that I have that actually tries to push the lid off of totes. Pitch is the other one. Pitch the bitch. But the gecko, he got on my arm and tried to jump off onto the door of the bathroom. But I don't know if he was actually just jumping because he would just jump. And you could literally play that song, jump. And he would just, it looked like he was just jumping around. And it's like, so, and he tried to jump like a gecko would. So that's why he got the name Gecko. Such an interesting personality. Where Snoot is just an asshole. Snoot is an asshole.
I have one like that. His name is Grumpy Pants.
Yeah, but he's the dominant male.
He was not a dominant male, but I decided to break that group up because I wasn't comfortable with it. So he's just one-on-one with the female right now.
Do you notice that the dominant males are usually the biggest cowards? When you if you take them out of their regular circumstances, are they not the ones that get scared the quickest?
Yeah, because the male I showed you that I picked up,
yeah,
he is the alpha of my whole group. Okay. And he's the most terrified to go outside.
Yes, I've noticed this. The girls are the ones that are like, I'm gonna go explore. I'm fine with this. Let's go. Let's go do this. It's like, okay. But even my zebras, man, I mean, they all have that kink tail, so I'm sure none of them were the alpha, except for maybe Blackbeard, because he was a big boy, and he had this massively black underbeard. Just genetic, just what there was. And so it was he might have been, because he was big for a zebra. And so, but not really scared, but he's not really like a bully. Like if they're eating, they'll try to steal from each other. But other than that,
see, the fire skinks don't do that. They all take turns at the food bowl.
Okay.
Like they'll grab a roach and run away, and someone else will come up and grab a roach and run away. And then they'll come back.
That's what they kind of do, where it's like you throw down the worm. And that's why I usually try to throw worms in different spots for him. And then he'll pick it up and he'll run away so the other ones won't come and steal it from him. And the other one will go get one and he'll kind of like move his head to where the other one can't steal it from him. It's interesting. They're very interesting behaviors, and they aren't stupid. There's no reason to ever think these animals are actually stupid. They actually even have the capability for emotional intelligence. They just don't have the connections that we do to fully flush it out. And if they were to come up with the happiness, it would probably take them longer. So if a reptile is moving very fast and making very fast decisions, it might be because it's overstressed or it's trained to do that. Even if you didn't train it, it might have developed that instinct to do that exact thing. If you don't see a delay, Calm Fancy, if he sees another beardy, he's kind of starting to head bob, but he will slowly Blackbeard. It takes over a minute for him to full Blackbeard up because another beardy's in his territory. And he remembers that those beardies are there. He knows those beardies are there. I've caught him in hunting mode trying to find those beardies in their enclosures. And I've taken him, so less than a month after I moved into this apartment, or this house, I lived in an apartment where Calm Fancy, my big beardy, watched those zebra skinks for over a year. And he head bobbed them every now and then, letting them know that he was in charge. Whenever he would go to bed, he would head bob because he knew that there was other beardies, there was other animals like the zebra skinks in the room. So he wanted to make sure that they knew that he was the top dog. even though he's a scaredy cat when it comes to trees. And so I took him into the reptile room because like I said, I keep my beardies in the living room, and I took him into the reptile room. The moment he'd never been in the reptile room before. The moment he saw my zebras, he started head bobbing them immediately, no delay. He remembers that these animals are supposed to be submissive to him. I made him. I held him up to the Savannah monitor, my enclosures for the savannas, and my Savannah monitor male. He would just he was trying to look bigger. Like he was so terrified of Fancy. Like he's just like. Now, do the reptiles remember their names?
No.
Okay. My beardies do. Pitch responds to bitch more than she does pitch. So if I say pitch, she goes. If I say pitch the bitch, she goes. Like, yes. But Fancy, if you go, what's up, Fancy? Yeah. So they do know their names, but I've used them in that manner. So, and they know worm. They know the word poop. They know good boy. So I try to keep it simple like that. I was editing a video once, and Hydra, my girl that I used to think might have been a boy, because she has the longer snout, she was like watching me, and in the video I kept saying good boy, good boy, good boy. Hydra was staring at me, and I look over and I say good boy, and Hydra immediately came to the front rock where I usually feed her. So like they recognize those terms. I don't really think my zebras do very well, but they do recognize the tubs that the super worms come in. And they recognize the lid lifting and closing. They recognize that. Now my Peter banded skinks, like I said, Gecko's actually intelligent, even though he's blind. Like he actually hears my voice, and I've learned to throw worms underneath his neck so he could get them. So no, they have some recognition. It is different than a beardy, though. I would say that. And that may have something to do with that forebrain and decision making. Huh. I don't know. It's interesting. I haven't got that far in the study yet. When they take these MRIs and stuff of these lizards, they have to sedate them. So you don't get that full picture like you do humans. And originally, it was wars is how we figured out what the brain actually does, because in World War II, bullets got so advanced that you could get shot and not die. So people were getting shot in the head and not dying, and they were like, okay, so the bullet's going through here, so therefore we know that's what's affecting this part. That's why they can't speak, or they can't see, or they can't use their left arm. That's how they figured that out from a start point. And then they used the MRI. I just did an episode on what Blindsight teaches us about the brain. And it'll teach you that if the eyes work and the cerebral cortex back here is damaged, that information still goes to, like I said, that spot in the brain, the modeling. So this spot on the inside. And so they'll still yawn if you yawn and do all that stuff. And then instead of traveling back, it'll actually travel a little further and then come down to do more. So it's linear. Information doesn't just drop. So when we talk about this gray matter in the brain, that's why that's so important to understand that if that's going underneath the brain to connect the two, then it's limiting what it's touching and what it's connecting. So if the imagination of these animals is at the top, that imagination literally has to travel through the forebrain into the thalamus, down where it can be corrupted, back up to the optic tantrum, and then that optic tantrum sends a signal to the medulla to do stuff. And then that sends a signal to the cerebellum that sends a signal back, and that moves forward. That's why there's a delay. So when you look at it like that, it makes a lot more sense that the thalamus is a lot more important than most people might give it credit for, because it's not just attaching things. It's what sends that data between things. So if skinks do have a thalamus more between the two, but yet because of the skink's long brain, I don't know what part of the brain is being attached. So that would give us a lot more information if we could figure that out. But there's no way to truly figure that out while MRIing them while they're sedated. So it's one of those tricky things that we're trying to work out. So this is why this behavioral stuff is so interesting. And I mean, when you think about that, they're not recognizing their names like a beardy, but yet they have that bigger frontal, and they do hear. So they do recognize things. They kind of do make faster decisions, but maybe those decisions aren't necessarily based on hearing, more on smells and other things going on. And it would be very interesting to see if they are favoring that left side when they ambush. So it's very interesting. Because, I mean, if you think about a venomous animal that ambushes its predator, that thing doesn't know a predator's coming along. It's only imagining a predator's coming along. There's no way that thing is going, I know if I sit right here, this exact animal is going to come along. Liam actually talked about some venomous that do that will actually slap down the grass in front of it to give it better striking. That thing has to use its memory and imagination to achieve that type of creativity. So those things have to function together, and they do have the dual hemispheres. We saw that. So that's very fascinating to think that maybe these things are actually different in the way they think over like a regular lizard because of that distance in the forebrain. Because that would definitely have some impacts, and eventually I'll get into that. But there's no real studies done on that I know of. But I didn't know there was a cerebellum study really done till like this past week. And they dive deep. I was 3 hours in last night before I was like, no, I have to go to bed. I have to go to bed. Like, wow.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah.
They may not know their names, but when I'm doing my nightly feeds, some of them come out because they hear the tote that the roaches are being opened.
Yes, like I said, they recognize that little white tub. My emerald swifts recognize the white tubs, and they're way smaller than a freaking zebra skink or a Peter banded skink. So it's very fascinating. So, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you think that you have any questions about? Anything?
No, not really. You did a lot of pretty exciting talking.
Yeah, and hopefully you didn't take that as I was trying to overshadow you.
No, it's educational.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I get a lot of people that don't want to live. Like I said, how many people heard me talk about slow blinking and never tried it? Never tried it at all, ever, in their whole lives. But they heard me talk about it. It's like I gave you an experiment of blinking, and you chose to ignore me as if I was stupid or something. I'm not taking it personally, because I know that's not how this was. I know people aren't doing this. It's just kind of, they're like, I don't really like that. Doesn't like, I don't understand it. I don't like, okay, this guy. So I'm just not going to listen to him. So having you on to talk about this individual animal, because you have more experience with this exact animal, but you've never seen the brains like this, right? Like you've seen the brain, but never like this, and the understanding of how the brain works. And does it kind of add up more to what you know of the animal? Does it kind of fill in some gaps in what you know? Like, boy, no, that.
I mean, it makes things interesting.
Yeah, and there's so much left to learn. Like this is not even remotely close to the end of this. But we see that these animals are not stupid, that they're brilliant, and they're tiny compared to snakes. And yet they may have a bit of emotional intelligence more than like a bearded dragon.
I will say they have much more personality than a bearded dragon.
Well, most beardies. My Pitch the Bitch has a very extreme personality. Like I said, anytime, like just today, I went out to go get an Amazon package. I got those mirrors to put on my walls so these animals can see out those little windows more. Because as I showed you with the zebra skink, they actually get that way. Well, even my savannas get riled up, and then when they get a peek outside, they're usually like calming down, like, oh, that's the outside. Because it's mental stimuli. It's very fascinating. I don't think there's enough people doing it. Even my flying geckos will actually take looks out the window. They seem to actually enjoy looking out the window. And they're a freaking gecko. I mean, it's really one of those things where mental stimuli, I mean, these things should not be in a prison. And mental stimuli is not stress. Even if it's stressful, it's not harmful stress. My bearded dragon knows there's other bearded dragons in the room, and he wants to be in control. He thinks he's second in command of all my other reptiles, and he still takes a minute to Blackbeard. He doesn't even Blackbeard with my zebras. He just head bobs, as if he's saying, I'm in charge. And they're not contesting it. I have seen, I think I might have a little bit of a video of it, but it's buried deep in my photos. But it's, I showed like Carry or No Name or one of my Peter Bandit skinks to Nubs, and Nubs was doing a slow push-up, which is a sign of submission. Like, okay. Very, very interesting that they would do that. And I've seen them with, like, when I have my savannas out or something, where they will, like, have a twitch. Like, and it's just that slow movement that kind of goes, I'm not trying to dominate you. I'm beneath you. We're good. And it's very fascinating because they do have interactions with other animals. And I highly suggest having glass between two animals and allowing them to visit each other. I will not keep my savanna out with the other, even my Peter Bandit skinks. My Peter Bandit skinks are almost as big as my savanna right now. And my savanna has taken very big notes that the Peter Bandit skinks exist. And she's very curious. And I know savanna monitors they'll eat whatever they get their hands on. So there is no way I'm going to hold those out together. And Love is my female savanna monitor. She's the one that, if you looked at my Instagram today, she's the one that I was leash training and stuff like that. And she watches them. She's a very intelligent girl. And I'm very afraid that she will try to eat my Peter Banded skinks, even though there's no way she could. So hell yeah, she would eat my zebras and eat your fire skinks like that if she could. If she could get her hand on them, she'd eat them in a heartbeat. So there is no way I want them out at the same time. And I know this because I've held them up the glass together. Well, you shouldn't do that because it stresses them out. I would rather them have some experience where they're not going to get hurt than have no experiences at all. And then that information is important to me because it's what taught me to turn my back to these animals and look back at them, because I would never have learned that. Particularly, like I knew that already, but I saw my Peter Banded skinks do that. That wasn't like I didn't hypothesize that. I watched them do that. And that right there was one of the most important things that I saw out of them. And I watched my savannas do that with my Peter Banded skink, where he was walking past their enclosure, and the moment that he turned, the savannas immediately jumped out. So it's one of those things where it's super important to notice that stuff. But yet, are you really going to figure this stuff out if you don't have some type of test? But doing it safely is the most important thing. I see people trying to put species together that are supposed to be able to be kept together, like emerald skinks, and then them killing it. It's like, well, you didn't test the waters. You didn't let them get used to each other. And I watched one person put a cage up against another one, and it let it sit there for a month after going through quarantine. And it's like, yes, absolutely yes. That is the best way to do it. You get to see their behaviors. You get to see how they interact with each other. How do you do it? Do you do anything special?
I take them out. I put them on my bed. It's a neutral ground. Nobody has claim over it.
Oh my God, yes. That neutral ground thing. I had somebody, I made a little short where I talked about Kathleen or whatever her name is. She was picking up rattlesnakes from a apartment complex, and she was putting them in the same bucket, and they were massively two different size rattlesnakes. And people were asking in the comments, why are their rattlesnakes not eating each other? They've got bigger things to worry about than each other. They just got thrown into a bucket. They have no idea what's going on. They are literally on neutral ground right now, and it doesn't matter the size. My bearded dragons, when I took them to the lake, after the two first times I took them, right at the end of the second, Pitch tried to start fights with compatibility. But the third time I took them, Pitch, before she even, like, this is how smart Pitch is. The third trip to the lake, I've got video of it. She tips her tail like this before we even part. That's hunting mode. This is I'm alert. This is I'm hunting. Skinks don't seem to have that, but bearded dragons do. Their tails will come up. I'm alert. Something's going on that I'm very afraid of, that I feel like I need to be alert to. I'm targeting something. Pitch was doing that before we ever got out of the car. Before we even parked. Third trip. She was already, the moment I put them down on the table, she ran off to go try to hunt some ants. And she tried to start fights with Hydra that day. Whereas the first two trips, because it's neutral ground, they're not familiar with any of this. That's exactly how that works. So then once they get familiar, and it's based on the individuality of the animal, how fast they get familiar with stuff. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Yeah. It's very fascinating, but people think these animals are dumb. It's like, no, test them out. Because of the episode I did where I introduced my Peter Banded skinks, I put them in a tote. I put a camera over the tote, and I put them on the bed, and I allowed them to see each other through the tote, and I waited for them to turn their backs to each other, and Broken and Gecko were staring each other down, but Gecko's blind, so I don't know how that works, and I didn't know he was blind at the time. It took me a while to figure that out. I've seen Gecko walk up to the edge of the enclosure. On the top of the enclosure where I feed some of the skinks sometimes, and he walks up to the edge because I was calling to him. I was talking. So he walks right up there, he gets right in my face, and stops right at the edge. But that guy's blind or hard of sight. There's something there. Like I thought that's incredible stuff, man. Now that you start looking back on stuff like that, it's like, that's incredible. And they stay out. Once again, we go back to that. Make sure if you're a reptile of a skink that buries itself, stays out during the day, it's sick and or dying. I want to do a short where we show a person in bed with a thermometer and a red forehead, and then we skip over to a reptile basking on a rock during the day, out in the complete open, because that means the exact same thing sometimes. Do you agree?
That would be interesting to see. I don't know if I would agree until I see some in person, you know?
I do, and I've seen Gecko do it so often that it's weird, because I can tell he's hot. And I can tell that light is getting through. So I wonder, I would love to MRI him and find out if his cerebral cortexes in his brain are actually working properly, or is it his eyes that are actually the problem? Because he's seeing the light, but yet he still sleeps under it. He still wakes up to my voice. They come out to my voice too, from underneath. And so he stays out all day long. And like you said, when they're sick and dying, they'll come out and bask. And a lot of reptiles, that's what they do. When they're out in the wild, they will go out and bask where they may not bask before. Where a lot of times they might want a cryptic bask. They'll be completely out in the open because they want to burn whatever out of their body. Same thing for newts and stuff. It's very fascinating. It's actually how it's done in the wild. Since they can't make their own fever, they have to create a fever by sticking out in the sun. It's one of those things that, and you're right, there probably should be way more studies. There probably is studies on that, since that's one of those things a biologist should be able to actually see. So there should be studies out on that. And that would be cool. I'll look into that. I'll try to make some videos on that, to the actual science and stuff behind that. Because thank you for that. That's a whole nother video idea. So
no problem.
For like 50 years from now, the way this study, because oh my God, this study that I'm reading right now is just wow. But it's so fascinating to think that these animals aren't just stupid. They just don't think the same way we do because of our spherical brain, but neither does a cat. But yet, I don't think there's any reptiles that I know of right off the hand that's actually cruel. Pitch is a bitch. I have seen individually Pitch actually arm wave a cricket before she ate it. You know, arm waving is a submissive move, right?
Yeah.
So she's coming down as a baby off her hide, and she does this to the cricket that came out behind the water bowl. And the moment he came out even more, she went over and ate it. And then as a baby, before I was more like, this is my first reptile when I got her as a baby. She literally went into her hide where there was crickets, slapped them, actually slapped the crickets and laid down to sleep. She bullied the crickets. I was like, maybe that, you know, but that's an individual animal. I've never seen the other ones behave that way. But Pitch is a bitch. Pitch is different. Now you know why she's named that.
I don't know. Seems like a fitting name.
Yeah, it really does. She's very interesting, and she's my baby girl. I kind of want to breed her just to pass along those intelligence, just to see if that intelligence, if we could get them to look like Calm Fancy and freaking be as smart as Pitch, it'd be like having a dog. I wish that was a joke. Pitch is a pitch, just like a dog. Is there anything else, any takeaways, anything else you want to talk about? Because I've had to pee for at least an hour and a half now.
Yeah, no, my phone's about to explode from overheating.
Oh, great. Any last takeaways? Anything that you learned that...
I'll tell you this. I have one lizard whose name is Charlie.
Okay.
Who actively comes out to be fed. And the more I ignore him, the more he makes himself visible.
I love it. That's that problem.
So he'll start like having just his head sticking out of his house. And if I ignore that, he'll come out, his whole body out of his house. And then if I ignore him again, he'll come out to a log that's incredibly visible.
Here's the thing. I was thinking of it as decision making. But do you think skinks have a better problem solving than birdies?
I think so, because I had a couple escape artists. Every time they got loose, they tried something new.
Would that length, because we know that's where their imagination is at, that their forebrain. So having that lengthy forebrain per size, could that potentially lead to them making better problem solving skills? That's interesting. Because that could be, because that's where your decision making is at, is that forebrain.
Yeah, maybe.
That's an interesting study. That's a study right there. That's interesting. That's why I love talking to people. That's why I love this kind of stuff where we get to develop stuff. That's so cool. Skinks may actually be better problem solvers because of the length of their forebrain. That's a good hypothesis. That's a provable one. That's one that's, I talk about falsifiable studies. If you're going to do a real study, you got to be able to make sure that you can prove it wrong. Like, it is capable of being proven wrong. Something where a lot of people, when they try to hypothesize stuff, they make it to where there's no way to prove it wrong. And it's like, no, that's a terrible study. That's terrible. You're delusional. That's a dream. You need to make a study to where you can prove that that's incorrect. And we could test problem solvings of skinks compared to other lizards with puzzles stuff, puzzle feeders and things like that. That's not hard. An undergrad could do that study. One of the things I'd like to do with a ball python, because it has the bigger kink and a little different cerebellum, it's kind of an outlier in that study that I'm reading up. And I recognize that the mandula was different from comparing it to a rainbow boa. What we need to do with it is take an enclosure where they can escape, turn the enclosure around, and then see if they'll still escape it and how they do it. And then build an enclosure out of acrylic. Just complete acrylic and see if it still works the same way, because that ball python should have more tactile functionality than others. God, I have got to pee. Well, do you mind hanging out for a minute and we'll give this one end?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to end the deal. Hey, everybody at home, thank you for showing up.